Thanks for joining us. The Columbian is pleased to welcome the candidates for a congressional representative from Washington's 3rd District. Congratulations to you both on last night's primary. As you know, I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor, and we met the other members of the editorial board. Just so you know, reporter Katie Sword is sitting in this meeting. She won't be asking questions here, though might want to speak with you later. And as you also know, we are videotaping this. We will post it unedited on our website for the benefit of our readers. And so we will get started. Again, thank you for joining us. I know it's a busy time for you guys. Why don't you just take 1 or 2 minutes to introduce yourselves to us and also to our readers or anybody who's watching, and then we'll go from there and get into some specific policy questions. So we'll start with Carolyn.
Sure. Well, my name is Carolyn Long. I'm a Democrat running for Congress in the 3rd Congressional District. I've been a political science professor at Washington State University for 23 years. I'm most proud of some of the work I've done with my initiative for public deliberation, where I train my students to be facilitators, and we get out in the community and we learn about how we actually have shared values and beliefs as Americans, and so we use it as an opportunity to talk about policy issues, which has been really nice. I was awarded the Irish Award for my community efforts a year and a half ago. I come from a rural community where my father owned a small business where I worked since the age of 12. I learned trade, the produce trade as it were, and that helped me get a job at Safeway, where I worked as a journeyman for 4 years, and that's how I paid for college. So I'm in this race because I'm really committed to the people of Southwest Washington, and I'll be present, accountable, and committed every single day.
Thank you. Jamie?
My name is Jaime Herrera Beutler. I represent this region in Congress. This is my hometown. This is where I grew up, fishing in Battleground Lake, swimming in the Lewis River, and in Climb Line, although right now is not a good time to hit Climb Line. Growing up here, I think gave me a really special perspective about the folks in this region. I would say they're not hardcore any party. They're very independent. People here like someone who's going to stand up for them. And I think being here has allowed me that perspective, which is why I'm the only person in this race who has demonstrated a willingness to reach over to both parties, sometimes with my party, sometimes against my party, but with others in our region to get real measurable results for folks here. The sea lion legislation that we finally got past the House is a great example. That one has been around, that was around from before my time. And when we started working on that, there were not a lot of Democrats who wanted anything to do with it because there were some extreme groups on the other side. We put some blood, sweat, and tears into that, and were able to get support from every House member in Oregon and Washington, which may not seem like a lot, but let me just share with you, the representative from Seattle doesn't vote for a lot of Republican bills. So that was a huge win for us. And now we have leaders in the Senate who are championing that legislation, and I'm hopeful the president's going to sign it into law. My forest roads legislation is another good example of that. The Obama administration had a rule that would have cost us around 160,000 jobs in our region with regard to forest products, forestry, manufacturing. And Kurt Schrader and I think this is a big difference. So rather than freak out at the Obama administration and kind of go apoplectic, I partnered with a Democrat from Oregon to put together legislation that it took both of us to work it through a Republican Congress and through a Democrat president, but the president signed that bill into law, overturning his own administration's rule. And that was something that helped us protect jobs. So I think the thing that I've learned about growing up here is that people expect results. They expect, they may not always agree with you, but that's not the prerequisite. The prerequisite is, how hard are you going to work for me? And I'm excited to talk about that. I'm excited to talk about the tax reform bill and the economy. And I'm sure we may have some words about that, among many other issues that are important to folks here.
Great. Well, thank you. Again, thanks to both of you. And, okay, let's start with tax reform. And
let's do it.
We have discussed earlier.
Round two.
But this is for you guys. We're gonna try and stay out of it and facilitate.
Right.
So let's start. Last year, Congress passed, and I believe you supported, tax cuts, and followed shortly by a $1.3 trillion spending bill. What are your thoughts about that? Any misgivings, or is it working as you expected?
So let me put it in context. Over the last 7 years when I've served in this office, Most of that time, we've either been in a horrible recession, double-digit unemployment, Clark, Cowlitz, Lewis, Oklahoma, all my counties, right? And then we kind of grew into this stagnant place. I think we were around 1.5% GDP growth. And that's where we were. People weren't expecting bigger paychecks or better benefits or more stable economy. It was just hang on and survive. And I think some of that is because the last administration's plan was spend more of our money, whether it was their stimulus bill, whether it was cash for clunkers, pick your issue. Their goal was to stimulate the economy. I'm not impugning anybody's motives, but it didn't seem to work. And we did take a risk. We totally reformed the tax code and cut taxes for the average single mother in this country by 70%, for the average family in Southwest Washington by $2,300, not to mention the standard deduction doubling and so on and so forth. And fast forward to today, we're at 4.1% GDP growth. I was told we would never see that again in my lifetime. And here we are defying expectations. Over 650 companies have reinvested in bonuses, in equipment, in hiring more employees. We're seeing over 300 billion of money that multinational corporations had overseas repatriated, right? We're seeing an economic explosion. I don't know that I could have had in my wildest dreams had it this good. I knew we could do better. But the fact that you can walk down the street and see help wanted signs, I mean, there are people sign waving to get people to come work for them. That's an amazing thing. In my mind, the goal is how do we extend that now?
Okay, and I'm sorry, we'll get to that.
Sure.
Carolyn, would you have supported the tax cuts?
Not at all, and I wouldn't have supported it. It was a straight party line vote. Democrats didn't have any input in the bill. And whenever you have legislation that just goes through one party, it's usually bad legislation. I think this was a corporate tax giveaway. I think it disproportionately impacted the people who are higher earners and not working class families. And it's really a shame that the tax cuts are not permanent, yet the ones for corporations are permanent. But I think the great travesty with this bill is the fact that this really is a borrowing on our generation, our future generations. It's contributing $1.7 trillion to the debt, and so that is debt my daughter's going to have to worry about, and her daughter's going to have to worry about. And so I think we ought to put it in that context, that we are benefiting people who have already done well in this economy even more, and it's on the backs of our future generations. So I think it's important that we call that out. The other thing that I would mention is if you look at our economic growth, this is a continuation of the economic growth under the Obama administration. To say that we have had growth because of this tax bill, it doesn't happen that quickly. And so it's not as if this is recharging the economy in the way the representative suggests, but it's in a continuation of what's happened. And so it's important to keep that in mind. But it's interesting to me that here, trickle-down economics talked about on a campaign trail in 2018. It has never worked historically. And so to say that it is working now is just misrepresenting what that tax bill is doing. But let's focus on the debt and the fiscal responsibility of people like me who aren't going to burden my future generations with something that benefits people who are already benefiting from this economy.
And to follow up on that, Jamie, in 2011, you supported a balanced budget amendment, saying our current national debt is crippling businesses, hurting families, and stifling the growth of new jobs. What has changed? Why do you support a deficit like that?
I don't support the deficit. Here's the difference, though. I believe fundamentally that the American people can spend their money than the government. That's a big difference between my opponent and I. Right? So if giving you your money to keep in your pocket versus me using it as the government to stimulate the economy.
Did you vote in favor of...
So let me keep going. I need to finish this point because this is central to the difference here. We took a risk, right? We had this whole conversation about this is going to add to the deficit if you cut these taxes, and that's a huge risk. But what my calculation was and what is happening is, CBO will tell you, for every 0.4% increase in GDP, that's over $1 trillion more to the economy, right? We're 2 points up from that. So what I said was at the time, we're going to generate just like Canada did over the last 10 years. We're cutting these taxes and we're going to see record revenue growth into the Treasury, and it's happening.
The CBO today said the deficit has increased 20% over last year's level.
Did they add in the record growth into the Treasury? I mean, I haven't seen the report you're talking about. I use these CBO numbers from this week. But what we're seeing right now is we have more taxpayers with bigger paychecks and a more stable economy paying down the debt. And that's the difference.
But they aren't paying it down.
We are. For every 0.4 increase, according to the CBO, we're getting $1 trillion more. That tax bill is 1.1 to 1.5 trillion. So we're going to more than double pay that back because our economy is moving. This is a totally different philosophy between my opponent and I. And I'd also like to point out that she supports a single-payer health care plan that
We'll
is
get to that.
But
We'll-
no, it's a $32 trillion plan.
We'll get to that.
But wait, I need to make this point because we're born again
Well-
deficit hawks here. If you're okay with
We'll
spending
talk
that,
about healthcare.
all right. But we're talking about budgets now.
Right.
Let's talk
Right.
about deficits. Let's talk about deficits. We are robbing our future generations to impact those who have already been successful in this economy. And they are disproportionately helping corporations. And you know how corporations are spending that money? Through buybacks of their stocks and through dividends. That is mainly what's occurring. We have a few businesses and corporations that have talked about how they're giving people bonuses, but you have to put that in the context of how much they're benefiting out of this plan. And let me repeat again, trickle-down economics has never worked in the history of our economy, and we are being told that for the very first time it is, and I just don't believe that.
Well,
and
I'm
I also
asking-
believe, excuse me, I also believe we have to look at who needs help in America. It is working class families. So if we care about working class families, I grew up in a working class family, those are the people who should have permanent tax cuts because they're the people who put money in the economy and they're the backbone of our economy.
So let me say,
So
I
let-
do believe we should make those tax cuts permanent, period. Which is why I voted for it. And it's postponed.
Wait. You got the time, let her finish and then you go.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic. And how are you going to pay for it? You're concerned about other issues, but I think that to make it permanent for individuals, working class families, is a fabulous idea.
So wait a
But
minute,
I
do I
think
get
that's
an
going
answer?
to
She
be.
just asked a question.
So what I really want us to talk about is how we are taxing future generations and benefiting people who are already benefiting. And how working class families are the backbone of this economy, and they are not being assisted in the way that they can be. And how this is not really the tax reform that we were promised. It is contributing to the debt. I agree with your numbers, Greg, and I think that we have to call attention to that. Also, if we look at our economy, let's talk about our economy. This president and the Republicans will speak about the low unemployment rate. That is not a good barometer of a strong economy. Think about stagnation in wages. We haven't had real wage increases for working class families since the 70s. That is a better barometer of economic growth than how many people are working. So let's change the conversation to what truly shows what's happening in our communities, and it's not just unemployment.
And Jamie, you were gonna.
There's so many challenges there. Look, I don't know what it's been like in Salem, but we have had a real challenge here. And you tell someone that having a job or getting a bonus or a pay raise or $1,000 a year extra isn't a real barometer, good luck with that here in Southwest Washington. That's a new set of tires for your car. That's the ability to pay for an unknown copay on a medical bill when your kid breaks a leg. That's real money. So you can get ethereal and talk about numbers in a professorial way, but the reality is when people make more money and they keep more money, they have a stable job. I will never forget the desperation on people's faces when they stood in line for my first jobs fair and they couldn't get a job delivering, papers, right? It was a very different situation. So to say that the economy at 4.1% isn't booming, that 650 companies not investing in workers is not a good barometer. I guess means that we have to agree to disagree on that. But it's really important to say this. You made a comment about buybacks, right? And I think that's valid. We should look at that because when we passed this bill, I said, look, if this doesn't work, I'm not wed to it. I'm not afraid to oppose my party on something. They very clearly have done that. But if it is working, I think I expect the same type of fairness. 75% of those corporate buybacks go into our pension funds, right? The worker in Ridgefield, right? The union pension fund that someone has. So some buyback is good. It means that their retirement savings are growing for the first time in almost a decade. So to pretend like the average person doesn't need that, I think is really missing the mark.
Now, when you talk about people who had a look of desperation, then is it necessary to also give the CEOs and the one percenters tax breaks as well?
Look, I don't think you should ever target them. Absolutely.
I'm not talking about targeting them, but did they also need that tax break?
So you feel like they should have been, so individuals,
I'm asking
we should
you.
have picked certain individuals.
I'm asking you.
You're saying we should exclude certain individuals? Like, hey, we're going to say everybody gets to play by the same set of rules. and you're the, I certainly don't think they need it, no, that's not my issue. But I also have never applied the tax code saying,
Well, except,
let's pick out the ones that make over this amount and say you
well,
can't do it.
we have a graduated tax system. I mean, that's fairly basic, and it wouldn't be anything new.
So I don't advocate for raising taxes on individuals, period. I don't.
But because you saw people with desperation, you think that
I think they needed jobs. Greg, they needed jobs.
But did the wealthy also need those tax cuts? That's my question.
So if people need jobs, where do jobs come from? Did you guys lay off during the recession? Did you guys lay off reporters and staff?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because there are people who own this company, it needs to be profitable in order for you to hire people. Is that correct? See, I would never have looked at those people and said, gosh, you need to pay more. I thought, how do we get those people to hire more? What do we do to create an environment where current businesses hire more people at all levels? Some of that has to do with energy costs, healthcare costs. I'm sure we're going to talk about healthcare. Regulatory burdens. We repealed over 16 job-killing regulations. And you saw the economy start to grow before the tax cuts bill. I think that was the first piece of it. My opponent said that it was because it was holdover from Obama administration. If that was true, then us repealing the Obama administration rules and regs should mean that we would have stopped the Obama growth, right? We should have, if we continued the Obama rules and regs and the Obama tax plan, then I could see that making a valid point, but we repealed them, and that's when the growth happened. And that's because there's a fundamental difference in how we see the world. I would rather a small business owner, we cut taxes by 20% on small businesses, in certain businesses even more, right? So they were growing and hiring. They're adding more to people's paychecks, and the stability is there. It's hard for me to understand. I think part of it for me is when I'm out and about and I'm talking to average people. I talked to a small business owner just in the last week. He's having to pay more to his entry-level employees to keep them from going somewhere else. That's good for everybody, especially the worker. They're having to invest in training initiatives and make their benefits more robust to keep them. Who does that benefit?
Okay,
The average
hang on,
worker.
Carolyn.
Income inequality is at an all-time high. It's as high as it was during the Gilded Age. And so what this tax bill does is it furthers that gap between the highest earners and working class families. And the unfortunate thing about that, aside from the fact that many families aren't seeing the economic opportunity, is that it's also driving this political polarization that we have because of the role of money in politics. So you have a tax bill which furthers the gap between the haves and the have-nots. You have the haves getting a little bit, and they're not permanent, and if people wanted them to be permanent, they probably should have not voted for the bill. And then you've got this problem fueling what's wrong with our democracy today, which is that people are demonizing the other side, they're taking personal pot shots rather than talking about policy, and that's what we see happening throughout the country, and it's corrosive to our democracy. And so I would not be in favor of any sort of a tax bill that furthers this divide, and that's precisely what this tax bill does. And we are doing it on the backs of our children. That's what parents have to remember. We are borrowing from our children to place most of the benefits of the tax bill to those people who don't really need it right now. Are there some that are great for working class families? Absolutely. I don't call them peanuts. I think it's very important that they are. But if you look disproportionately where the benefits go, I've explained that it goes to the highest earners and corporations.
90%.
And that is, yeah, great.
So, would you vote in favor of raising taxes?
Would I vote in favor of raising taxes?
Yes. If you get sent to Washington,
Right.
would you advocate for raising taxes?
It depends on what we need the money for, and it depends on how it's done. I wouldn't advocate for raising taxes on working class families because I think that they are the engines of our economy. So if we're looking at tax reform, I'd like it to be comprehensive, like the 1986 tax reform bill. It was a result of bipartisan efforts. You had people coming together and seeing how a bill could benefit people who really needed it. And I think that's the type of tax reform I would be in favor of. But it's hard to answer a hypothetical unless I know what it's going to look like. But I would not have voted for that bill. And if I could repeal that bill, I would.
So, in an answer, then that's yes, because the average family in Southwest Washington, average family of four, has $2,300 more in their paycheck this year. So I guess if you would repeal it, then you're going to take that back. That's a tax increase.
If
the
Bill-
average single
yeah.
mother
Yeah.
across this nation is seeing a 70% tax increase.
If Bill Gates walks into a bar,
Wait,
then the average
so-
worth of every person in that bar goes up 20 times. So let's look at
So
where
yes,
the money's
so I guess
actually
the answer
going.
is yes.
Let me finish. We should look more specifically, rather than throwing numbers out like that and talking about the tail of an individual who might
Numbers
be
by the tax
benefiting,
foundation?
and then let's
The
look,
CBO?
let's look at the numbers. Let's talk policy. If you wanna talk, who's benefiting
This is,
from
this
this?
is undisputed.
Yeah.
$2,300
Did you have a
for the
question, right?
average family in Southwest Washington. So if you're gonna vote to repeal it, you're voting to raise their taxes. It's simple. I said, no, I won't. I absolutely won't vote to raise their taxes. The average single mom, and I'm talking about working class.
Would you vote to raise taxes on high earners?
No. I've never voted for a tax increase. Here's why. We don't need more
So-
of your money to spend. We need
Okay,
to prioritize.
but Republicans have floated a plan that would squeeze $537 billion out of Medicare over the next decade and would cut
You're gonna-
$4 billion to Social Security.
Okay, I don't know what plan you're talking about. I don't support raising taxes on Social Security. I don't support cutting Social Security.
Then
I
how
don't
do we
support.
pay for that?
I don't support cutting Medicare. I don't support. Right. I support strengthening the trust funds.
Then
That's
how
one
do
of
we
the reasons
pay
I
for
opposed
it?
Obamacare. Pay for what? I'm not
For-
in favor of whatever you're talking about.
For Medicare and Social Security.
So so you're saying there's a problem with their funding?
I'm saying that the national debt is $21 trillion and it's growing by $1 trillion a year, the highest deficit in history.
So I believe we need more taxes coming into the treasury because we have more taxpayers and a more robust economy. That's exactly what's happening. Right?
But then why is the deficit higher than ever?
It's going, that's what I'm trying to tell you. The CBO has already said 0.4% increase in GDP.
The CBO said today that the deficit has increased 20% over last year's level.
Yeah, because we passed a bill that took taxes away from the government and gave it back to people. But growth is measured over time. In the first 2 quarters of this year, we have seen record growth. Let's get to the end of the year, and if that growth holds true, we will have added more to the economy to pay down the debt, right? So you're asking
so,
me
huh?
in a quarter, look, if
you're
I'm
saying-
wrong, I'm not afraid to change. Like, I'm not wed to this as an ideology, but I can tell you for the last 7 years, people not getting a raise, not being able to leave a crappy job, having 0 benefits wasn't good enough for me. We had to do something, and we had tried everything. Like, we had tried government stimulus. We had tried government propping up different businesses, Solyndra. Like, we tried it, and it wasn't working. Now it's working, and all these skeptics and all these born-again deficit hawks are coming out saying, oh, the deficit, the deficit. Well, if
Well,
our
wait,
plan to pay the
wait,
deficit
Did
down.
you start to say that the
ahead.
deficit would, the tax bill would pay for itself and by the end of this year? Is that what I heard you say?
No, I said over time. I said, let's get
How
to the
much
end of
time?
the year. We clock it in 10-year periods. That's how all these numbers work.
So in 10 years, there'll
So-
be a net benefit?
I think we're gonna see a net benefit sooner than that. I think we're gonna see it in the next year or two.
The next year or two?
But I think to break the big numbers in the 10-year window, I think we're gonna benefit, absolutely.
Although in
Canada just did this. In the last 20 years, they had the highest corporate taxes, higher than ours. They cut all their corporate taxes to lower than we just did.
no,
And they've more than
So
paid
sometime
back
in
the
your next
debt.
term, we'll probably see this, it's, if you're reelected sometime in this next term, we'll see this case where the deficit is going down rapidly because of the tax cuts.
If the deficit starts to trend down because we have more people paying taxes, that's what I'm after.
And you're seeing this happening much sooner rather than much later.
Oh my goodness. So in a 10-year window, right? And I think we're gonna be reevaluating in 2 years, right? This is not something that's
Okay.
gonna go away.
Uh-huh.
And if this is, so I get the concern. Like, the debt is a huge issue to me. No one has fought harder against that and cut more. As an appropriator, we've cut over $1 billion in dollar for dollar. So it's a huge issue to me. But it wasn't working to say the government was gonna spend the money and then we're just gonna raise taxes to pay it off.
All right, I understand this is a new
It's a
approach.
different
A
approach.
new different
Exactly.
approach. When
But-
will we know that, when will
Oh
we
my
see
goodness.
a net positive from this?
Well, right now we see that positive. People have more money in their
Even though
pocket
the
and they're
deficit's much
spending it.
bigger.
So April, I think was the last number I saw, was the highest year on record for taxes coming into the treasury. And we didn't raise one tax.
so frankly, I find it disingenuous when you say born-again deficit hawks, when you were the one in 2011 supported a balanced budget.
And I supported it, I think the last time it came up, which was like in the last year.
Okay.
Here's why.
But did you also vote for the 1.3 trillion spending bill?
I absolutely, and so, okay, so
So that does not sound like a
Absent-
deficit hawk to me,
Right.
to
So
vote in
absent,
favor.
here's the thing, so absent a bill that was gonna stimulate the economy, meaning you're not gonna, there's no way to pay it back, right? You're spending money that isn't coming in. That's a problem. But if you know that the highest, like, if you know that people have, there are more jobs, 90% of Americans have more money, are making more today, and the consumer confidence is an all-time high, we're at an all-time low for unemployment, then you know you're building the economy, and you can pay it back. Here's the reality. We put over $1 billion more into NIH. We put it, in the last 2 years, I serve on labor, health, and human services. There's a lot of people in my own party who fought me on that. They said, we can't afford this money, deficit, deficit, deficit. And in my mind, if we were in the middle of a recession and I knew money wasn't coming in, which is where we had been, right, over the last 5 years, we had kept that increase very little. But because I know our economy, again, in April, more taxes into the Treasury than ever before, I knew that it was time to make some of those investments. And I wouldn't call that money back, frankly. I really think that there are places where we need to spend money. I think the NIH is one of them. It did add to the deficit. But what I'm telling you is I'm not doing this like a drunken sailor. I'm doing it eyes wide open, knowing we have more people making more money than we have in a decade. Which means we have more tax revenues coming in. Again, I'm not saying I'm the world's chief economist, but somebody's got to do something for working class families here, period. I'm tired of feeling like their only jobs are entry-level jobs. Now, I come from a family that has no connections.
And I'm sorry, we need
Yeah.
to move on from taxes and economics.
Well, I do want to add the economic piece when we talk about healthcare.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, let's
now our
talk
healthcare,
about
okay.
Well, then let's talk about healthcare. Where do we go from here? What would you advocate? We'll start with Carol.
For healthcare,
Yeah.
I think we need to immediately shore up the ACA. It was an imperfect bill in terms of how we bring affordable healthcare to Americans, but 20 million Americans have benefited from that bill, and there's currently bipartisan legislation, the Marie Alexander bill in particular, which would shore up the markets and help provide some stability that we haven't seen. And it has been not let out of committee by leadership and Republican leadership. Instead, what we have are the Trump administration's efforts to undermine the ACA. When we see that in terms of the money allocated to advertise for it, we see it in terms of the unwillingness of the Trump administration to defend it in court. And failing to do that means that people with pre-existing conditions are not going to have access to care. So what we see is an intentional effort by this administration to undermine that bill. On top of the fact that for a long time, Republicans voted to repeal it and talked about a replacement, and then they had a long time to figure out what that replacement was going to look like, and we never really saw one that was good. And I believe the representative voted to repeal the ACA 80 times. And so that continuation of that effort, I think, is a problem. In terms of driving down the cost of health care, we need to start pursuing a public option where individuals and organizations can buy into a government-sponsored program, which also provides the opportunity to actually drive down costs and drive down the cost of prescription drugs. And then at that point, we have to take a step back and see what it looks like, because that allows employer-provided health care, which many people are in favor of, the ACA, people want to choose to be in the marketplace, and then a public option, which allows some competition to those private insurers. And then we take a look and see what things look like.
Jamie?
Well, I think I voted more than 80 times to repeal the ACA because it is ridiculously flawed. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. You're going to save about $2,500 a year on your premiums. That's a joke. And you're going to be able to keep your insurer. I've had to step in with at least 2 of my counties where in the exchange they completely lost access to all care. Right? Clickitat County in the 11th hour after beating on the insurance commissioner, worked a deal. They finally got one plan to choose from. We got notice that the plan in Pacific County was going to make people, instead of going across from Astoria, from Ocean Park, to get their cancer care right there at the Critical Access Hospital, they were going to, because of how the ACA works, they were going to cut off that care, make them drive all the way to Longview. So they drive across the river, get on a bus, drive to Longview 5 times a week for their oncology care. I mean, I don't have the time to tell you about the problem
So
with the ACA.
would you still advocate repealing
Absolutely.
affordable care?
That doesn't work.
Well,
That's
well,
the
what would
ACA.
you
That's
replace
current
it
law.
with?
Oh my goodness. There's several things. And this is why I voted against the Republican repeal bill. It had like 2 of these things. So we've been talking about this forever. Whether it's purchase of health insurance across state lines, protecting small business health plans, association plans, which I have a real measurable result on in this state with the new administration, making sure health savings accounts are available for even younger workers, and having a robust competitive marketplace where people can say, you know, I want to get a generic only plan. Those aren't even allowed in our state. So there's several pieces. The other piece I think is critical, and this was probably the biggest reason I voted against the Republican plan, is Medicaid. So I believe in safety nets. So we have to have these things working, right? But there's always going to be a population that hits a safety net. Some of them have to do with people who have pre-existing conditions. They're never going to be profitable, right, according to some big nasty insurer. So the government has a responsibility to make sure those people have care. Right? So in our state, we have high-risk schools, and we need to open those back up, number one. We also need to make sure Medicaid is serving those people. The bill that the Republicans put together, I was concerned, and I had an amendment to try and fix, would have put disabled, vulnerable children at risk. And that was ultimately, for me, the thing that you have to do all these things in the private market, but you also have to make sure that the safety nets are robust. Again, a reason we have to repeal the ACA. What the ACA did was put able-bodied childless adults ahead of disabled children or medically vulnerable seniors, right? Because the Obama administration said, we'll pay you more federal money if you enroll a childless adult, an able-bodied childless adult. And that's what happened. Most of the people in Washington State got transitioned off of plans onto Medicaid, thereby diluting that safety net. And now I have families, I have to step in and help families who adopt kids, right? Who need access to a pediatrician, the kids on Medicaid, they can't be seen because it's diluted it to the point where no new provider will take these kids. The ACA is a total disaster, but we can maintain protections for people with pre-existing conditions. We can make sure the least of these are still covered by a safety net, but part of the way we do that is we get the people who shouldn't be receiving government-run health care off. It's not that difficult. And I want to talk to the budget piece of this too once we get that.
The reason why the ACA is imperfect, I admit that. It was what the Democrats could get through Congress, and it has provided coverage for 20 million Americans, many of whom rely on it.
One thing, let me back up. Earlier you said that single-party bills are inherently
Yes.
flawed. That was the case with the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
It didn't receive any Republican
Well, they
support.
worked, yeah, but they also worked on it for 18 months. It's not as if they pushed it through at the last minute and didn't invite them to the table. When we're talking about the things at the end, yeah, it was pushed through. That was a mistake. And it was also a mistake to drop the public auction, which is something that the Democrats wanted, and they chose not to include it because they wanted to get some sort of health care. You know, when I hear that the ACA is a disaster, let's talk to those 20 million families, 20 million people. Let's talk to those millions of families who have had health care for the first time, ones who now have preventative care that is in part of their plan so they don't get sicker, they don't go to an emergency room, they see a doctor in a proactive way. Those people have benefited from this. But it was demonized, it's apparently being demonized still today when people are, you know, not getting sicker, and it's saving lives. So to say that we're gonna repeal it and not have a replacement and then try to have these patchwork efforts like health savings account, that sounds really good if you've got a lot of disposable income. Do you know what half of Americans don't have? Is a lot of disposable income. So let's call it for what it is, which is the Republicans want to undermine it so that it doesn't work effectively, and they've done that from the start, and that's a problem.
I wish that were true. I do wish that the Republicans had a chance at repealing the ACA. Republicans botched that effort big time. We haven't managed to change that law almost at all, right? So what's happening right now under the ACA is under the act that was passed in a partisan manner. Again, I didn't vote for it.
Aren't the Republicans in control?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we should change this. But what I'm saying is the ACA is falling on its own. It's not because we were successful in passing legislation to change it.
It's falling
I wish
because
we
of the
were.
law.
Yes, sir.
I guess I wish we had changed it. I wish we had put together a better bill. I'm just pointing out the fact that the ACA is still the law of the land as it was passed. So it's just kind of the basic there. And I also think, you know, as I tour critical access hospitals and small clinics and physician offices, go to the ER at Southwest Washington, or what's it called now? It's not Southwest.
Peace Out.
Peace Out. It will always be that to me. Or Legacy, Salmon Creek, right? People don't go to the ER anymore because they can't get in. Like, that's part of the problem, is it's exacerbated. When you honestly, a one-size-fits-all is a big part of the problem, and that's what the ACA is starting to do. And a single-payer plan would take us even a step further. It's funny to me that people are talking about, my opponent's talking about borrowing from her children, or borrowing from our children, right, to pay for things. A single-payer plan just came out, Urban Institute, not a Republican think tank, just came out and said that that plan costs $32 trillion. So our annual budget's about $3 trillion, maybe $4 trillion. That would add $3.2 trillion every year to pay for that. So how can you be in favor of that and say your budget, you care about the budget, when you would almost double it?
Carolyn, how can you say that?
I didn't say that, so she's misrepresenting my position. My position is you shore up the ACA and you pursue a public option. The reason why the ACA is having problems is because you lose the individual mandate, healthy people flee the markets, and then you have a risk pool which is much higher. So, again, concerted efforts by this administration to continually undermine it so it collapses. This is what the Trump administration said it was going to do, it's what they've done, and Republicans are not standing up for this bill. And it's great to say that you want to favor legislation that protects people with pre-existing conditions when you know it's not going to get out of committee and it's not going to pass the House or the Senate or be signed by the
Talk about
president.
disingenuous, that's a
So
pretty
I think that
heavy
one of the things that we
accusation.
have to talk about is what's happened historically on this issue and how the Republicans have failed to deliver for the last 8 years, and how they have patchwork things like health savings accounts, which really aren't going to benefit people because they don't have the wealth to do it. So short the ACA, hold Republicans to account for not letting the debate move forward. I mean, we had a ridiculous number of repeal and replace votes when nothing was being done on the issue of health care by the Republicans.
That's not
They
true.
had
That's
plenty of
not true.
time to be working as policy wonks in the back of the room and in committee, coming up with an alternative plan, and they
which-
chose not to do it.
I
And I
think
think the
the-
American
the
people
word cloud
know that, and I
that-
think that the American people are very frustrated with what the Trump administration is
Look,
doing.
I don't represent the Trump administration. I think that's probably clear. It will probably always cost me in a primary. But the reality is, no one in this room, I pray, cares about pre-existing condition more than I do. I pray no one has to go through that. But getting this right, it's not critical to me just as a congresswoman. That's ridiculous. It's critical to me as a citizen here in Southwest Washington and as a mom, which is why I told the President of the United States, hey, I'm sorry, the bill that you all put together. So the first piece of that bill was actually the one that had been being put together over the last whatever number of years. I'm not on that direct committee, but it had to do with getting people off the exchange, out into other places, right? The able-bodied folks who had no business being on Medicaid, giving them other options. Great, I'm with you. What they ended up adding was the Medicaid piece. And that Medicaid piece jeopardized fundamentally disabled children. And I guess that for me wasn't keeping our promise. And so yeah, it's really a bummer to have to oppose your own party at a critical juncture. And that's a big, in my mind, that's something people here expect. They expect you to put the interests and the values of the people here first. Look, I could scream all day about the Trump administration, I really could. But how effective is that? It's not. I didn't do it under Obama, and I was able to get legislation moved. I'm not doing it under this president, and I'll get legislation moved. Now, don't get me wrong, you gotta stand up. On healthcare, I stood up. On drilling off the coast, I stood up. On BPA, I stood up. On protecting steel tariff jobs with regard to Kalama, I stood up. We're working on other trade issues. So you have to be able to stand up, but to just decry a party, all I hear is anti-Republican, anti-Republican, anti-Trump, anti-Trump. This district actually did vote for President Trump. I didn't. That's what I find ironic. But this district did, and I want to know how my opponent intends to represent the entire district, including those people she vehemently disagrees with. And that seems like a difficult thing for her.
So what I'm going to do is what I've been doing since I started this campaign, which is hold 30 town halls in front of over 2,300 person, live town halls where I'm hearing what my constituents have to say. I've held at least 3 town halls in every county in this district. And it's resonating with people because they see that I'm out there listening to their concerns and I'm forming plans on how I want to fix them when I'm hired in Washington, D.C. And if you want to know how I'm going to work across the aisle, look at what I've done within this own community and working with people from diverse views. I see myself as a problem solver and not an ideologue. I see myself as somebody who can really champion all parts of this very diverse district because of my own personal rural background, but also because I'm somebody who's been a student of commerce and I know how it works and I know how to get it done. That's how I'm going to do it.
And let me go back just for a second. Would you support a single payer system Or the Medicare
Depends on
for
how
all.
it looks like. So there are multiple bills that are in Congress right now about the public option. I like the Murphy-Merkley bill because it allows individuals and organizations to buy in. We have to look at whether or not a Medicare for all is what we need after trying to do the public option. I think the public option is the best way that we can get the support to people. So I don't know what Medicare for all is going to look like. I don't know what the vote's going to look like. I don't know how we're going to pay for it, so that's why I'm pursuing a different route.
So no on single payer.
I think we're eventually going to get there to some sort of universal coverage for everybody.
Well,
And Jamie, you mentioned some places where you disagreed with the Republicans or with President Trump. Carolyn, give me an instance where you agree with the president, either policy or his approach.
He asked me this last time and I couldn't come up with it. His approach, I have a very difficult time saying I agree with his approach. It's very authoritarian to me. It's very antagonistic. It's really focused on dismantling what President Obama has done rather than fixing things. So on things from the Paris Climate Accord and pulling out of it, to what he's doing with the Affordable Care Act, I very much disagree with how he's doing. He's like a bull in a china shop. So I think he did something on antitrust that I really liked a couple of months ago, and I should have that answer for you, and I don't right now. But I do think the approach of the president is furthering the divide in this country, and the inability of Republicans to really stand up and say to stop it on many issues is what's destroying this democracy. I think Congress is fundamentally broken right now.
Jamie, you mentioned some policy places. What do you think about the president's approach?
I've not appreciated his approach in a lot of ways. But it's interesting, having said that though, I appreciate the willingness to say to China, I'm going to put American interests first. Would I have done it the way he's done it? No. But sometimes you got to go toe to toe with the bully, and someone had to do it, right? So I probably wouldn't do things the way he's doing them, but I'm not going to say that they haven't been effective in certain areas. So to the degree he's going to benefit this district, I'm not going to run from him. To the degree that he is not, I'm not afraid to stand up to him.
Do you think that tariffs upon Chinese goods, did they benefit this district?
I'm hoping that this is not the end. I'm hoping that we get to a point with the Chinese, and we are now getting that information. Larry Kudlow, the economic advisor, said that within the Chinese government to government, they're reaching out saying, we know we're wrong on this. And so my hope is that he stays focused on China and tightening the screws, and we get out from under their thumb. You can talk to any small business here. I've had several call me and say, they're stealing my IP. Like, we put it online to sell it, and then we see an alternative website with our logo on there, and it's stolen. And we're losing a lot of money. So the trade imbalance and the bad acting that we've seen needs to be addressed. Now, I think if you were asking me, part of the problem is he's biting off more than he can chew. Don't pick a fight with China, and then pick a fight with EU, and then pick a fight with, right? And which is why I had Steelscape come to me and say, we got 300 steel jobs here, and he's picking a fight with Australia, and they're a trade partner, can you help us? And we did. We went to the administration straight away, and we're successful in getting them to remove Australia from that list. So I think if anything, he might be fighting off a little more than he can chew, but he's elected to do that. That's not even my purview, right? Again, to the degree, I look at how's it going to trickle
Isn't
down
it
here.
Congress's job to stand up to him?
Absolutely, which I've done on tariffs, on drilling, on healthcare, on BPA. I mean, yeah,
Carolyn,
absolutely.
what do you think about tariffs?
Congress has an Article I responsibility to have control over trade, not the president. He said this is about national security, and he's using it just to start a trade war. So I think Congress needs to reassert its institutional authority over this issue. They've just ceded away the president, and this is what happens. He picks fights with a lot of people that he shouldn't. This is a president who said he likes a trade war. Look at what it's going to do to our economy. And what's so interesting about President Trump is his sort of wanting to destroy everything, is not only did he do this, and it's disproportionately affecting Washington State, which is the most trade-dependent state in the country, but then he said he wants to borrow $12 billion of taxpayers' money to bail out the farmers who are being disproportionately affected by this. So he blows it up, then he wants to tax us to fix his mistake. But Congress should reassert its authority, and they can, and they haven't. So when I hear Congress saying, Members of Congress say that they want to stand up to the president. I'm certainly not seeing it in their public statements on this very important issue.
Well, if you
the other
had
thing that I would
wait.
mention is that
So-
when we
I
had
didn't have a chance to
steel
respond on
and
this.
aluminum tariffs last time, it only lasted a year. It was during the Bush administration because the economic impact on jobs was so significant that we walked away from it. So imagine what this trade war is going to do. And it's going to be hurting Southwest Washingtonians and Washingtonians because of how much we trade, how much we export. And so we need to have Congress step up to them now and take their authority back.
Jamie?
I don't know which representative's statements you're reading, but if you're reading a representative who serves this area in Congress, I have led bipartisan letters and actions to the administration. I've spoken with, whether it's different secretaries, Secretary Ross several times, to advocate for a more targeted approach to our steel, or to our trade issues. Go after bad actors, we're 100% behind you, but please don't bite off more than you chew. Here's the other piece, I think some of these things need to be dealt with through treaties that are then ratified by the Senate, period. I think that's how this should go, and I'm fully in support of that. If you read the job description though, that's if you're running for the Senate, that's not a House position. And I think the other piece that's critical here is, you know what, again, people in this district, people who are feeling these impacts, who I've talked to about, I've had people, business owners come to me and say, look, we're paying more for X, Y, and Z because of this trade, whatever, pick which issue it is, which industry, right? And they say, but you know what, I like that he's standing up for American interests. And these are people who voted for him. So I'm gonna let him play this out a little bit. I'm gonna keep a vigilant eye on our interests at home, cherries, pears, different specialty crops. I've already stepped in for steel, right? So I'm gonna do that and continue to do that, but someone had to pick this fight with China. Someone had to do it. It was hurting us in our economy. Is there, and I don't mean to change the subject yet, but I wanna add into there, we need to talk about some of the most important things for this region. We've been talking about a lot of big national issues that do have impacts, but there's a couple issues that I want to make sure
And
we talk about.
we'll get to that. And,
Okay.
first, just a couple of other things related to DC and the president. If Republicans remain in control, who would you support for Speaker of the House? Just real quick.
Well, as soon as I know who all is running, I can get back to you.
Okay. If Democrats take control, who would you support?
I think it's time for a change. I think the Democratic Party has to really reevaluate its past leadership. It is difficult to answer that question in a vacuum, not
Sure.
knowing who's going to step up. But I do believe that one of the reasons why we have such a dysfunctional Congress is because of the people who are in leadership. And that the people who are going to be elected in November, I think, are going to bring a different problem-solving approach to Congress. So we want to have leadership that reflects that, and also leadership that will be able to forge bipartisan consensus on some of these important policy issues. There's currently an effort with some members to make sure that there's a rules change so that the leader who's selected would have to enjoy some bipartisan support. I really like that idea. So then they're representing all members of the House. So there's some things we can do with rules that may change the outcome of who is a leader.
And then another general DC question. If the president fires Rod Rosenstein or works to get Robert Mueller fired, would you
Preempting the investigation.
would
Yeah.
you support impeachment hearings?
So impeachment hearings are the result of it's treason
Would you
and
support
criminality. You're asking me in a vacuum.
Okay.
I'm going to say this. I think that Rosenstein and Mueller need to finish their investigations. I think we need to not be afraid. If the president has said he's done nothing wrong, let's let that whole thing play out and let him prove it. Take him at his word, he's got nothing to hide, then those should not be impeded. I've said as much and I've pushed as much because I think it's so much more about, it's not about Republicans or Democrats or even this administration. It's really about the way our government operates and the trust that is put into it. I think that this investigation needs to play all the way out. And I think we should go wherever it finds.
Carol?
I agree 100%. I think Mueller needs to do his job. I believe if the president were to fire him, that we would further the constitutional crisis I think we're already in. And it would be very harmful for our country. And so my hope is that it finishes out, so I agree with the representative, but then also that the evidence is overwhelming, because I think that if it's not, it's going to be really difficult for our country. And we need to have leadership in Congress where we're not just at each other's back all of the time. So I hope it doesn't happen. And I worry that it might. I really worry that it might, because I've seen indications of the Republican Party unfortunately not standing up to this president throughout his administration, throughout the 16 or 17 months that we've lived in under the Trump administration's rule. So I'm concerned.
Jamie, in general, aside from you personally, do you think your party has stood up to Trump enough?
I think some have and some haven't. Here's the thing though, and I can't speak with the Senate because they are a little bit different beasts, but for us, we're a direct reflection of our districts, right? I've already shared with you, my district voted for this president, and I didn't with my personal vote. So I've had to be very careful to use, so it's not just a title, it's a job description. I need to represent them, which means in my mind, the way I've read that is, don't throw bombs and darts for the sake of it. And I took that same approach with Obama, quite frankly. But there are some districts where, I mean, we saw it in different primaries. It didn't matter what you had done, it didn't matter what you had achieved, it mattered whether you were with or against the president. So it's hard for me to tell those people, those voters. Well,
Okay, then one more question along these lines. Last week, when the president tweeted out about the Trump Tower meeting from 2016.
which I don't follow the president on Twitter. You're going to have to fill me in.
Well, he admitted that the meeting was to get dirt on the Clinton campaign. Without using the word, he basically admitted collusion. Is that acceptable from a president?
Well, collusion is going to get him an indictment, so I would.
Well, except that's not a legal term. That's,
Okay, I get it. So, do I think it's wrong to have a conversation about how to do opposition research? No. Do I think?
even with the foreign power.
Well, no, there's laws against working with a foreign power with regard to our election. And so we need to that's why I think it's the best course of action to let someone who was neither Republican nor Democrat finish this investigation. Because then it's not conjecture, it's not armchair quarterbacking. It's saying, look, this is what our intelligence community said. And that to me, as a representative, I mean, I can say whatever I want as an activist, and that's the job of activists, right, is to drive that. But as a representative, I need to be very careful about throwing around the word impeachment. I want to make sure that if something was done wrong, that it's all laid out, or if nothing was done wrong, it's all laid out, because that's what I'm going to act on. And I take it very seriously. It's not just a campaign
So
slogan.
can I ask something? I think I missed it. Did you answer the question though, if he did fire Mueller, would you vote to impeach, or? I wasn't sure of the answer.
I'm not sure if I would. I would need to be able to see what, so I think that would be the biggest mistake he would make. Because again, he says he's innocent, and that to me would not indicate that. But I need to see what's my responsibility. Is that what we should do? Is that how you handle that? Or are there other ways to take care of it? I'm actually not sure. I've never wandered into the area of impeaching the president, so I have to actually know. I'm not a constitutional law scholar.
Carolyn, with the president basically admitting collusion, is that acceptable?
No, it's
in the
not
president?
acceptable, nor the 16 lies that he tells every single day. And he gives us something to rail against every single day with a tweet or a comment that he makes. And unfortunately, we have to stop taking the bait. And as disappointed as I am with this president and Congress's inability to get his job done and checking the president, I think we also have to be more proactive about serving the needs of the American people. But it is absolutely unacceptable. If he were to fire Rosenstein, that would be yet another example of somebody obstructing justice, in my opinion. And we've seen
So you
too
would
much
vote
of
to
that.
impeach?
I'm waiting for the investigation, but if he were to fire Rosenstein so that the investigation doesn't go through, I would absolutely vote to impeach.
Let's move on to one of the local issues. What can the federal government, what can Congress do to help us replace the bridge? And would you be in favor of replacing the bridge?
I'm absolutely in favor of replacing the bridge. It is an earthquake hazard. It's a congestion problem. It should have been solved years ago. And that's one of the reasons why I hope to be on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, so that I'm able to bring federal dollars. We had so many millions of dollars that Democratic leadership had secured for that bridge, and it all fell apart overnight. And I see that as the biggest infrastructure problem facing us. I see it costing people time every single day that they're crossing that bridge. And so I would do everything in my power to secure federal funding. What it looks like, we have to wait till we're there. I know that the Trump administration talks about infrastructure investment, but he's really talking about public-private partnerships, not federal dollars. But if we're able to replace that bridge, I think it would benefit many of our lives.
So I absolutely think we need to replace it. We need to replace it with something that's going to reduce congestion and allow people and freight to move easily, period. I have said and would be all for an additional piece or lane to get bus rapid transit. I think the biggest key is it shouldn't have light rail on it. That's why this
And
whole
why do
thing
you
fell.
why do you think that?
I think it would, well, I don't even know if it'd work in Portland. It doesn't even pencil in DC, and they move 1 million people in and out of the city a year. So it's an economics issue. So Southwest Washington is still growing and moving. So to set a fixed rail into a certain area and say, this is it, this is the only way, whereas if you do a bus rapid transit, you're still gonna pull down the same federal dollars, but it can evolve with you. So as we evolve and move, we've got our bus rapid transit going down. This is an area where I think it just makes economic sense for us to have something that will work for our community, that we will use. It's, some people, I've ridden subways, I think they're great. It just needs to fit, and that's the biggest problem, is it didn't fit. So I'd say a compromise would be pull down federal dollars for that bus rapid transit. And I think this is one of the areas where my experience working across the aisle, and as a senior appropriator, I'm almost near next in line, could happen in this next Congress, to being a subcommittee chair. And you don't supply money for this from Transportation Committee, you actually supply it from the Appropriations Committee, and we put money into projects of regional and national significance. None of the money that was available before has gone away. Same pots, still lots of money in them. The biggest issue is we need to have some consensus. And if you truly believe in fixing this bridge, then you need to be full-throated opposing the tolls that they're putting on it right now. And that's the biggest area of concern for me.
Okay, so
Yeah.
fixing the bridge or replacing the bridge?
I think, so if you want to replace it and it makes the best economic sense, I'm not opposed. Fixing meaning seismic
But
and
which
length.
would you do, fix or replace?
I don't have a preference. It needs to be safe and it needs to move people. And I would prefer not the most expensive. I don't need all the bells and whistles. I need something that's reasonable. And I think the feds need to make the lion's share portion of this. But if you don't support getting Oregon's legislature in order on this tolling issue, that money is forever diverted from a bridge fix. That's fundamental. I sat next to Governor Inslee at the West Vancouver Freight Access ribbon cutting, and I said to him, Governor, we're sitting on the stage, and I said, Governor Inslee, we need a hero here. As a senior appropriator, I was able to get a moratorium on that funding it was the omnibus bill. And guess where it fell out? In the Senate. And we have heard nothing from our senators on this. Governor Inslee, to his credit, stepped up and said, we're not gonna let Portland do this. I wanted bells, man. I would have done the happy dance on stage. If you believe in fixing the I-5 bridge and making it safe, replacing it, fixing it, I'm not wed to something there. And a good compromise would be, let's have transit on it, let's do bus rapid transit. You have got to fight these tolls. This is a bar none issue, and I think you probably have a lot of relationships in Oregon and in Salem. This is an area where we could use some real help. I don't care who wins this election. If we can fix this, I think this is the biggest issue for moms. I have a friend who lives in Cowles County. She has to drive to OHSU to get her kid care, because that's our regional center. To pay those tolls every day, and the congestion pricing, I mean, if you have to go at a certain time, if you're the small business worker, you have to work at a certain time, you can't tell your boss, hey, I'm going to show up at noon. You have to show up and you have to pay the congestion pricing. And the rub to me, and I said this to the Senate, I said it to Senator Merkley, and I said it to Governor Inslee, I said, hey, look, if they do those tolls and they use that money on the roadway that the people are driving over, I'm not going to love it. I'm not going to say I'm going to be the advocate, but you're going to shut me up. Because how can I argue that? I mean, the Trump administration's proposal on infrastructure right now, it has public-private partnerships in it, which are a no-brainer, but it's heavily, they're going to try and get new revenues. Secretary Chow has asked us for that, but they're counting on tolls because it's a Republican concept. It's a public-private, or it's a pay-as-you-play kind of deal. Like, you're using it, you pay it. And I told the governor, I'm not going to love this, but at least it's fair. At least I can't fight that. Give us something.
So Carolyn, before we
Sure.
get into that, would you favor light rail or bus rapid transit? What would be your preference?
I think it should be light rail ready. That's what the city of Vancouver's talked about in the resolution that they passed. But whether or not it's that or bus rapid transit, I think I want to look into it a little bit more. I think BRT does provide some flexibility that light rail does not, though.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
The tolls.
Yes, tolls, bridge. I would start out by saying that I have just told you, and I think I did at the previous interview, that I think that replacing the I-5 bridge is the biggest infrastructure project we have to tackle. I'm very pleased to hear the incumbent speak about how she is concerned about it as well. I would also ask what has been done in the last 8 years in order to address the I-5 bridge. And if we have a member who has power because they're on appropriations, what has she done to move the job forward, move the project forward? Because I'm not seeing a whole lot, but I'm glad to hear the talk about it. I think we have to be very good about taking the congestion pricing plan that Portland's trying to force on us, which is terrible, nobody agrees with it, and separate it from the issue of the I-5 bridge. The representative is conflating the two, they're two separate issues. So on the congestion pricing, I think all people would agree the way Portland did it was terrible. And tolls particularly, which would disproportionately affect Southwest Washingtonians, are a bad idea. But that's trying to change how people move in terms of times of day. It's not the I-5 bridge, they're two separate issues. And so I think I heard the representative say that she would be in favor of tolls if it were part of a project. And so that's good.
And as far as the tolls,
Yeah.
what do you think about how Jaime has fought that issue? Would you do anything differently?
On the congestion pricing?
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. No, I think that's fantastic. Portland did it wrong, and the way they rolled it out, in a way that would potentially hurt the constituents of Southwest Washington is terrible.
So one of the things that she lodged against me in that last one was that I'm
I think it
I'm
just
okay with
complimented you.
tolls.
I think it just
I'm
complimented.
sorry,
not
go
okay with tolls. I just want to say that
Okay.
on record. I was just saying it would probably take away a little bit more of my argument to fight tolls was my point.
If those
If-
tolls actually benefited
I mean, it'd be
the
pretty hard
people
to
who were
argue me
paying.
on that.
Sure.
I'm not saying toll away. I'm just saying they probably would move the point.
Do you know what it's going to take, Greg, is leadership and somebody who can work with the Oregon delegation. So I will work with the Washington delegation, which will be predominantly Democratic, I think, after November 7th, and the Oregon delegation to get funds to this project.
Well,
And you have to be able to do that and show evidence of being able to work across the aisle on this particular issue, rather than coming from a place of no and saying, oh, I guess it's now no tolls ever. Then how are you going to have a project that's going to be funded? Because it's going to take federal dollars and state dollars. It's going to take somebody who can exercise leadership by working in a bipartisan way with Oregon.
I think you're
I'm not
in
sure
my
that's
wheelhouse. This is what I've done my entire time. So everything you're talking about doing, I have been doing for the last 7 years, including putting money into the appropriations pot for transportation projects. You don't get to come down here and tell the locals exactly how to write their bridge. That was the mistake that was made last time, which is why it fell apart, quite frankly, is the locals didn't have enough input.
Didn't they have dozens and dozens of public meetings?
Interesting you should say that,
For
because
15 years.
Yes,
A
how
public-
Hendrick was
so
first.
let me address this.
Yeah.
So a public meeting may not be the only way to get people's accurate feelings on things. Because thrice, the people in this county voted down light rail, and lo and behold, after 15 years of public meetings, the project had light rail on it.
Sure.
So you completely illustrate that having a lot of meetings doesn't necessarily mean you know where people are at. So I have put money into making sure that federal dollars are there when this, and it's not gonna be everybody agreeing, but when the meat of the people in this county agree, full steam ahead. The other piece is, I have worked hand in glove with the Oregon delegation and the Washington delegation. Worked with Suzanne Bonamici on tsunami stuff. I've worked with Kurt Schrader on forestry related and sea lions. I've worked with Ron Wyden on forestry stuff. I've worked with my own delegation, Derek Kilmer, on ocean acidification and disaster funding. So it's good to say it, but it's even better to do it. This is how I've operated. I'm not just trying to get elected saying I'm going to do this. I have done it my entire career, and nothing will change. The difference I think here is I am not afraid to stand up to the biggest bully on the block and say no if it's not in the best interest of Southwest Washington. And that does take some courage.
I don't want to dismiss bipartisan efforts to address things. like the Sea Lion. I applauded you for that publicly, and applauded you for continuing the effort that Brian Baird started with Doc Hastings to address this issue. So I think it's fantastic to have examples of bipartisan cooperation. I believe every representative should have a roster of those accomplishments that they can tell, because it does show you're serving the community. But I also want to see bipartisanship on the issues that matter a whole lot. Infrastructure, healthcare, lowering the cost of prescription drugs. All of those issues are impacting everybody's lives in quite a significant way. And when you have a 90% voting rate with the president, 88% with the party, you're really voting a lot in a party line vote. But I applaud the representative for that.
Give me an example where you would vote against the Democratic Party
Well,
on policy-wise.
Probably regulation. I think that some of the regulations are overly burdensome to small businesses. My dad had a small business, and we saw how hard it is sometimes to have a one-size-fit-all regulation. So I would be in favor of some carve-outs and rollbacks, but not like on the issue of the environment. So I think that that's somewhere there would be a difference of opinion on that issue. I believe in public-private partnerships, and so I may differ from some of my Democratic colleagues in that particular issue. And on the issue of healthcare, I think even though there's bipartisan support for some of the measures I've talked about today and in the last interview, there's a growing number of Democrats who want to move in a different direction. And I definitely will differ with my party on the issue of campaign finance reform. I'm proud to say that I haven't taken a corporate dime in this race, whereas many Republicans and also Democrats take corporate money, and I think that's poisoning our democracy. So those are some examples.
I would also be proud to say I'm not taking a corporate dime in this race. It's illegal to do so. Let me say I truly believe 100% in lowering the cost of prescription drugs, which is why I've worked in a bipartisan way to support pricing transparency in Medicare. I supported a Democrat amendment to that in our appropriations bill requiring CMS to tell us what you're paying, who you're paying, and what the kickbacks are. And it was opposed by my leadership. I've also co-sponsored the prescription drug safe routes from Canada. It makes no sense to me that people here are paying more for prescription. And this is kind of a holy grail within Republican circles. But why are we paying less for the same, or they paying less for the same drug when our people should have that same access? And I truly believe that you shouldn't be bipartisan for the sake of getting a notch on your belt. You need to pick the issue. You need to say, look, so the tax bill is a good example. Man, I wish some more Democrats wouldn't have listened to Nancy Pelosi and held back on that. I think if they would have done that in the Senate, we could have passed that bill with the permanency for the individuals. That's where it fell out. It actually was in the House. However, it was the right thing to do, so we moved ahead. It was a right to oppose the tolling on I-5 at the state lines. It's not going to be further down. It will be at the bridge. So we're talking about the bridge. It's not conflating it. It's going to detriment. It's going to be the biggest issue to getting that bridge fixed if it goes into effect. So sometimes you do have to be willing to stand up, and I've done it with both the Obama administration and the Trump administration. Now, as a matter of operating, you need to be agreeable. You can't be a jerk, but that doesn't mean you can have differences of opinion, strong differences, and still get things done. And I've worked with every member of the delegation in our immediate area my entire time. And
Can you clarify something?
Yes,
here?
yes.
So you said about you haven't taken any corporate dollars, and it's illegal to?
And now state offices can. Yeah, this gets lobbed at me all the time by my opponent, and it's not a clear understanding of campaign
You can
finance.
look at the FEC reports to find out where the money's coming from.
Well, and
Exactly. It's all online.
Talking about campaign finance, have you received any donations from the NRA?
I think I've received in my entire 8 years something like 4,000 or 5,000.
And if they, would you accept more if they came to you?
I don't know. I don't actually think it. So let me say it this way: no one who's given me money has influenced how I vote. I mean, I've had people come to me who've said very
But
few
would you
times.
accept NRA money
I wouldn't,
in this campaign?
So let me say I support the Second Amendment. So people who support it
Would
want
you
to give me
accept
money.
NRA money?
I wouldn't be opposed to support from anybody who wants me to continue to elect. Oh, I shouldn't say anybody. I wouldn't be
Planned
opposed to
Parenthood?
people. Are they sending me a check?
I don't know.
I mean,
I'm
I'll spend
asking.
it. They may not like how I spend it, but yes.
Well, that's what I'm asking. So you would accept any donations
So I'm not.
that are legal?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
So put some legal parameters on it,
Yeah.
and you know, I wouldn't accept money from the Ku Klux Klan or some of these fringe groups, but there are people who support the NRA in our district who've sent me money, individuals, a lot of them, and they say that.
But the organization. would
I haven't
you
asked
accept-
them for any money, let's put it that way.
But you've accepted it,
Oh, I have.
and you would if they sent you a check tomorrow.
Probably not. But it's not because I don't support the Second Amendment. It's because I don't want to waste time talking about something like this.
But you know what, people really care. People
So-
wanna know how honest.
And I
you
get
are.
that, which is
Okay.
why I answer it that way. It's not that I am gonna oppose the Second Amendment in any way, but it's part of the reason I also haven't asked them for money, is I don't want there to be this red herring for people to spend time on. I mean, the issue here in my mind is, are you better off economically or are you not? That's what this election is gonna come down to.
So, but did you say you would not accept an NRA donation?
Probably not, but it's, again, let me say, it's not because I don't support the Second Amendment.
Right, no, that's-
I
The
don't want that to
NRA
be
isn't
like-
gonna give me any money, I would not,
But
I would
if
not.
they wanted
I
to.
would not, but I would happily receive funding from Planned Parenthood, which is the other
Yeah.
example you did, because women's reproductive health means a lot. And it's not only a liberty issue, but it's also an economic issue for women not to have control over their bodies.
Let's, and I wanted to use the NRA as a avenue to get into questions about gun control. What are your thoughts? So, first of all, do we have a gun violence problem in this country?
I definitely think we have a lot of people with mental illnesses who've been using guns to harm their fellow citizens.
Would you
Absolutely.
support any gun control measures, a ban on assault rifles?
If it's reasonable and consistent constitutionally, I'm not opposed. It really, the sky's the limit in my mind.
Would you vote in favor of a ban on assault style weapons?
So, let me ask this, so you think it should be illegal?
No,
I don't
I'm
think it
ask-
should be illegal to own,
No,
an
I'm
AR-15.
asking if you would support.
Making it illegal to own
The
it.
sale and manufacture from this point forward.
No.
You would not support a ban.
So in my mind, the biggest issue is that there are people right now killing other people. And you can ban a certain type of firearm, and people are gonna move to a different type, or they're gonna move to this, or they're gonna move to that. And unless you're willing, now I have supported, background checks, I have supported those things that are illegal, enforcing, the law there, which has been a big part of our problem. Virginia Tech, Sutherland Springs, we haven't enforced the law. I'm all for that. But again, if you're gonna get into the constitutional issue of this, I wanna fix the problem. I mean, we're seeing this happen in other countries that don't even allow guns, right? They're using other things, they're getting a hold of it. We've worked to put, I think in the last 2 years alone, we've put, I think maybe in the last year, part of the omnibus, over $2.3 billion into mental health safety, primarily directed at our schools. I did a conference call, and it was open to every superintendent, school districts, mental health counselors, and police chiefs in Southwest Washington. And I threw it open, because I thought, you know what, they're gonna talk to me about firearms, not a question in my mind. But I didn't want to lead them. I said, this is so me as a policymaker can understand what do you think is going to work best on your campuses to help protect your students and your staff. They spent the first 10 minutes talking about marijuana policy. Not one person during that conversation said, you need to lock up this type of firearm or this type of firearm. You know what they said to me? They said, you need to give us mental health funding. We need school resource officers, and we need to have health counselors specifically trained in each of our schools.
So you say local school officials are more concerned about marijuana on campus than people bringing guns?
I'm telling you
to school?
what my conversation was on this call and what the first 10
They
minutes
said
of
they're
feedback
both,
was.
they said their
They
paramount
spent-
concern was marijuana at school.
Let me tell you exactly how I said it.
Okay,
And I wouldn't extrapolate because I'm not going to put words in their mouth, so I would be careful.
okay.
The first 10 minutes of the conversation was about the detriment of marijuana at home with these kids and the drug problems that they're experiencing and then its impact on their mental health. That was the first 10 minutes of the conversation.
Did anybody recommend arming teachers?
No, several said don't.
Oh, shocking.
And I'm not advocating for that, right? So what
No,
they told
I'm
me
not
to go
saying
get
you.
money for
Your party is
was
advocating for that.
what they told me to go get money for. Well, her party's advocating for abolishing ICE, and I'm not saying she's doing
Okay,
that.
we'll get to that.
Let's not get kooky here. $71 million for Project Aware Grants. Battleground has one of these right now. Gets mental health counselors into the schools. And that totally got zeroed out in this last appropriations bill. And because I'm more senior on the appropriations committee, I said, are you kidding me? This is the #1 ask of some of my schools. We restored it to $71 million in funding. We've done the same with student resource officers and COPS grants, because that's what they're asking me for. Now, I could tell them, this is what I want to do. You know, I was not opposed to metal detectors, and we have them at every federal building, and schools are wide open. They didn't love that idea. They didn't feel, and one of them specifically said, and I won't say who because I don't want to, but he said, we don't want more gadgets and gizmos. We need to address the issue where it's at, and it has to do with mental health. And I think that's where they were talking about with regard to drugs and the increase in opioid use and the kind of the gateways there, which is why we put over $6 billion into opioids, 23 million in this area. Again, because I think it all comes back to mental health. I really do. I really think these kids, one of the counselors said to me, I have the next generation of kids who are going to cause these problems. And I won't even use the word she used because they were pretty graphic. But it's worse than it's ever been. These kids are broken and they're coming from broken families. And I can ban all the rifles in the world, but in my mind, how do we fix that?
The question was about gun violence.
First of all, would you support a ban on assault weapons?
No, I've said that.
Sale
I think
and manufacture?
no. I think the better measure, the better avenue for doing that is to regulate them under the National Firearms Act. It's a 1934 piece of legislation, because the ban that was in effect previously and the one that's proposed now doesn't do anything with the existing assault weapons, and so I'd rather have it be done through the NFA. It's been an effective piece of legislation and regulating who has Tommy guns, you know, and who has silencers for their guns, which I think the representative was trying to remove from the NFA. So that's been my position all along. I do think gun violence is a tremendously difficult problem, and I really like the question about the NRA, because the reality is the NRA has sort of driven the gun safety measure debate in a way that is completely unproductive. There's wide bipartisan support for things like universal background checks, for bans on bump stocks, for getting people adjudicated mentally ill so they don't have access to weapons, for people being able to get extreme risk protection orders, so somebody who is a domestic abuser doesn't have access to firearms. But unfortunately, we're unable to really move the dial on the issue of gun safety because the NRA always says you're coming to steal our guns. I believe in the Second Amendment, but like all amendments to the Constitution, they're not without restrictions. And so when we talk about gun violence, we have to look at measures that will decrease gun violence overall. It's why I'm so excited that the CDC can now study gun violence. We now need to use appropriations to fund the CDC so it can do so that our policy decisions are not driven by rhetoric or fear-mongering, but by science.
I agree that bump stocks should be illegal. They have been. I think adjudicating mentally ill folks who have the right to buy, I think that's one of the biggest things we need to do, is make sure that if someone has red flags, right? I mean, some of these people have had major red flags, and people have reported them, and there's no avenue to turn them in ahead of time.
So just from what I hear regarding gun violence and gun control, is there any place you guys sharply disagree? It sounds like you're kind of along the same lines.
I think the CDC research is another piece.
Mm-hmm.
No, I agree.
Maybe we disagree on the assault weapons because I have a mechanism for whether or not somebody has access to them. So I would emphasize that.
I definitely believe that background checks, as they are, the law of the land should continue with regard to those. So there is definitely a mechanism to make sure that they're not in the hands of the mentally ill or the felon. Yeah, I agree.
How about immigration?
Yes.
Is this a move to try to fix a problem that's gone overboard, or where would you draw the line on what's being done?
So first I think we had to look at what's happening on the border with the political refugee crisis, different from immigration. Again, there's conflation of the two. These are men and women and their children who are fleeing countries where they are seeking asylum from the United States. So I think we have to handle that separately. You know, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and the images and the sounds that we heard of parents being separated from their children is heartbreaking. Finding out now that some of them will never be reunited for various reasons is heartbreaking as a parent. So I think we had to look at that separately. We had to reunify the families as soon as possible, and then look at the underlying issue as what's driving political refugees to the United States. You know, what can the U.S. do to help those particular conditions? On the issue of immigration, there are areas where we have bipartisan support, but leadership in Congress has not allowed movement forward. And the best example of that is the Dreamers. And parties from both political parties in the American electorate have said we want Dreamers to be able to have citizenship, but we can't get it out of committee because the Republicans won't allow it. What they're trying to do, what the Trump administration and Republicans are doing, is using the refugee crisis and the Dreamers as leverage to get a wall. And that is an infrastructure project that isn't going to create the types of jobs that I think will be created by a project like the I-5 bridge. So let's look at where we have broad areas of agreement. Let's talk about a path to citizenship. But let's also talk about border security, but one in a way that is effective and not just sort of demonizing people across the border and saying we need to erect a wall. So that's how it would start, dealing
So,
with it separately.
I believe very much that family separation never should have been U.S. policy. I was relieved when the Trump administration reversed course. I'm kind of a trust but verify person, so I put language into an appropriations bill that said, you said you've reunified everybody under a certain age, great, but I want to know to Congress the number who were separated, the length of their separation, the number that have been reunified, and the status of those who have not. Again, I trust him, but I'm going to verify that HHS is doing what it should have been doing before. I don't think it's radical to say we need to control our borders. Every country does, even those who are more socialized than we are. It's necessary for security reasons. I think it's conflating the issue to say that they're all asylum seekers and political refugees when we know that they're not. Many of them are bringing drugs over that border, and you can talk to folks in law enforcement in the counties up I-5 that I represent, they will tell you we have major problems there. So to open that up and say, well, they all are seeking asylum it's just naive. You need to recognize that we're a nation of laws and we need to have strong borders. Having said that, the DACA kids have been agreed to by the president, no less. Again, I was shocked when he said it. I don't know if you saw the State of the Union, but he offered citizenship not just for the Dreamers, but for every member of their family. It was like 1.6 million, total amnesty. He said it in his State of the Union speech. He offered it to Chuck Schumer, and Chuck said no, partly because both sides, Republicans and Democrats, are very guilty on this issue of using it as a political football, and the Dreamers especially. This has been an issue that I've taken up within my own party. But Trump, again, I'm not the one out there saying, hey, he's doing this, this, and this that I do. But he actually offered 1.6 million folks, DACA kids plus their family, citizenship, and the Democrats
In
scoffed
exchange
at
for
it.
what?
I think it was a border funding, and they said no. And I was like, really? That's an easy gift. Do it, do it, do it, do it. That we provide certainty for those kids immediately. Now it's been a political football this whole time. I voted several times now to give those kids a pathway. It's tricky though. You don't want to put one group of immigrants against another. We have people who come here on visas, they bring their kids, like on a green card, and they have to take their kids back out of the country. And then they look around and say, well, gee, this person happened to sneak by the law, and their kids are going to get amnesty. And I abided by the rules. So I really actually like some of the legislation that I voted for that we put together that said we're going to take all those kids into a pot, and we're not going to grant them amnesty. We're going to make them all legal, make them all safe, and allow them then to all apply in the same way that other folks would. So we're not going to hold anything against them, but we're also not going to put a certain group of kids ahead of another group of kids. I mean, when I look at the DACA kids, I think they've been a part of our community. They didn't have that choice. We need to make sure that they have a security for their lifetime, not just the next couple of years. And again, I smiled because I thought, wow, I looked around and thought, there are Republicans in my party who would flip their lid over what the President of the United States just offered the Democrats. And to prove that this has become, so sadly, an issue beyond the policy into the politics, Dems rejected it.
So, but do you think that was a good deal?
I would have taken that.
So
I would have taken that. And I don't even think we have a responsibility. I feel like, wasn't Mexico supposed to fund the wall, right? But I would have taken that because those kids would have been done.
But do you agree with the border wall?
Yes.
I think we need it.
You think we should build the
So
border?
and let me say, I don't know that it all needs to be steel, right? You can do electronic fencing, it's 21st century. Maybe in certain areas it's just more border patrol. I'm not going to say I'm an expert on whether it needs to be a physical wall the entire way, but we do need to have a completely secure border, and I voted to put more money into Homeland Security for that purpose. We've also voted to put more money into adjudications. Some of the problem that we're facing at the border has to do with the number of people that are coming in waves, and they literally aren't getting it done because they don't, it's just a body issue. So we put a lot more money into just getting more adjudicative law judges down there to get through those cases more quickly.
Yeah, I want to go back to something I said in the previous interview, which is one of the things that we should do in Congress are single issues, not trying to bundle things together because, we're putting these decisions of, is it a good, sort of your question, Jody, is it a good deal? So I'm in favor of border security, I'm not in favor of a wall because it's not going to solve the problem, because one of the reasons why we have an immigration problem is because people fly into the country and they overstay their visas. So we have to look at the facts and who is here illegally and then have policy solutions crafted at that particular, using that particular angle. I do think we have to recognize that Donald Trump demonizing of people from the border is terrible. I've got DACA kids in my classroom, and they are living in fear of this administration. We have deportations that are happening in Pacific County that are ruining the shellfish industry. And again, there's something about refugees and immigration. These are separate issues. So I think I heard the representative say that that they're the same. So I just want to clarify that let's not muddy the waters. They're two separate issues, and they should be handled separately, because political refugees are coming here through the legal process so they could get granted asylum. They're not coming here. They're not sneaking across the border. But it's the visas that is a problem.
Well, and I don't disagree that there are people who are coming. Well, then so you're telling me everybody comes to the border and comes
No, I'm
over
saying
is a political refugee.
I'm suggesting.
My point is that
That's
has to be
you-
adjudicated.
you
You
don't
can't just let
understand
someone
what I'm
go and they say, "Well, I'm a political refugee," and trust them. You just can't trust them.
Well,
You gotta verify
99% of them, when they come into the country,
They
they're
claim
fashioned with
asylum
it,
right now.
and when they're fashioned with an ankle bracelet,
which is part of
they
the
go
challenge.
they go through the process.
So-
And so we have a process that works for refugees. It is a separate issue
Well,
than
that's
people who are crossing the border illegally.
well, that's
They're
the point.
try-
It's not.
They're
working.
trying to come to the country legally to get asylum. Donald Trump didn't like that, so he decided to separate women from their children, men from their children, and then he did it intentionally so he can get his border wall on that immigration issue. And you were silent
I
for
wasn't.
10 days.
I wasn't
You were
taking
silent
issue
for
with
10
your
days
characterization. My point
when this
was
happened. And
everybody.
there are people calling me, and I'm not even a representative, saying, what are you going to do about this? Where's the representative on it? I am a mother. I can't see how any mother
Oh my
would look
goodness.
at what's happening
Which is why-
and would say, these people are coming here to bring drugs into the country. They are fleeing political chaos
So
at
everybody
their
goes, wait a
home.
minute, this is ridiculous.
At their home.
This is
They are
ridiculous.
taking the
At
most
some point,
difficult
at some
journey
point,
with
you
their
have to stop.
children, and they are
At some
separating
point you have to
them.
stop.
It is unfortunate, it is heartbreaking, and it is done so Donald Trump gets a wall. And that is exactly what he's doing, and that's why I issued a press release on this issue, because we have to call attention to it. It is terrible. And yeah.
Go ahead.
Starting to
Also-
think you should run for the Senate because the filibuster is in you, girl. So the length, here's the issue in my mind. If you just trust that whoever comes across the border is a political refugee, you're going to end up doing, so my colleague from Eastern Washington, actually I had another colleague, several actually, one showed up with an identity from someone from a nation that is on a watch list, dumped in the garbage before they cross the border, right? If you don't believe that we should have control over that, then you're inviting people
Well, I
to
don't think
manipulate the system and
Although
hide
this-
in people.
Carolyn wasn't saying we
No,
shouldn't
it
have
wasn't.
control over it.
She said I was conflating the difference between asylum seekers and people sneaking in. How do you know the difference?
Well, I
And
don't,
she
Because
said
I'm
you're
talking-
complaining. If you don't
Yeah.
control the border, you don't know. And
Because-
am I debating, like, wait a minute, I need to finish, because she filibustered
Yeah,
that last
no,
5
go ahead.
minutes, for crying out loud. Visa overstays is about 30 to 40% of our problem. So are you advocating for increased enforcement and deportations?
I am advocating that we go after the employers who are employing people.
So you want
who are
to,
here illegally.
but it's illegal for those employers to ask their employees. So you want to go to Eastern Washington, you want to go to Central Washington, you go to South Central Washington, it's in my district, and say, break the federal law and ask them, are you legal or illegal? And if you have overstayed your visa,
I think there's
then we should sort. So then what do? Are you going to deport them? See, it's
If
not
some-
all a talking point. Are you going to enforce and deport them? People who overstay their visas. It's a
If
simple
people have
question.
overstayed, if they've overstayed their visa, they're in the country illegally, and they are criminals, then I think that we should prioritize deportations in that manner.
Okay, so,
Absolutely, 100%.
so breaking immigration law and overstaying your visa
Change the
doesn't count
immigration law,
as a
change the
criminal.
immigration
So
law.
you don't think we should deport
I don't think, I
people
think
who have
that,
broken the law?
I believe that President Obama, who had a record number of deportations during his administration, did what we should do in terms of people who are here illegally, which is go after the people who are the criminals rather than people who are working and trying to feed their family. That's exactly my position.
Here's the thing though, is, and you can change the law.
Yeah,
Right
you
now, that they're operating under the law, which is if you break the law and enter illegally, you put yourself in the category to be deported. And in my mind, we do need to get, that's exactly why I've said, we gotta get more money down there to the judges to weed this out as quickly as possible, because there are people who are seeking political asylum. And I want those people to see us as an opportunity. I think the other piece here is not just border security, which is why I think we need to have it, but we also need to fix the immigration system, and I voted to do this, to allow people who wanna come here and be a part of the American dream. I think this is the solution, honestly, is to not just do border and DACA kids, which is what it's kind of come down to. I think we need to fix it so that those people who wanna come here, those people that we're educating in our universities and then saying you have to leave, we need to fix that. If you wanna serve in our military, you've earned your citizenship, in my mind, and I've supported and co-sponsored legislation to that effect. I think that's the bigger picture, is making sure that we're still a nation that invites people from all over the world to become a part of us. And again, you have to have control over the in and out system to do that.
Do you think that's the message that's getting out under the current climate?
I don't think that's, so I don't want to speak for the administration. My read is that is not, I don't know if that's his view on it. I should say it this way, because I think it's possibly the Justice Department that's running the show a little bit, and I don't think that's where they're coming from. But that's why I've supported legislation to that effect in Congress, because I think that needs to be the broader message. You can talk to people in this district who are immigrants, who earn their citizenship, they came legally, they worked through the process, and some of them are successful. I mean, many of them have amazing stories for the kids and grandkids. And they're the first to tell you, don't just let the whole thing go to pot. You need to, people want to be a part of this country. Make it so that they can, even if they're not wealthy. I think that's a big part of it. You should be able to get through the process even if you're not wealthy. But there's something to earning it. And these people are proud of earning it, and they don't want to see that go to nothing either.
And so I want to clarify that you would be in favor of maybe part of a wall, part more border patrols.
What's going to
whatever.
work?
Okay.
Whatever gives us security over the
And you
border.
don't think a border wall would be effective?
No.
You think there are other, but you're in favor of
Border
border
security,
security?
Absolutely.
So, okay, I
Absolutely.
just.
And I
wanted to-
also want to make clear that I also believe in a path to citizenship, which I don't know if I included in the answer.
So,
Which I think the
good-
representatives
Good
as well,
discussion.
so that's-
So, okay, tell me really quick and I don't want to spend too much time on this, what's the biggest issue that, in your mind, that we have not brought up here today? Jamie?
Well, I think that the biggest issue that has really been a minor or a smaller piece of the conversation has to do with the economic security of people here. We haven't talked about our hydro system and our energy costs. We haven't talked about protecting our forests. And I actually think both of those things.
Can we have you guys back tomorrow for that?
Tomorrow I might be in the other part of the county,
Oh.
next county over. But this is actually huge, right? So I've worked very hard to change the forest policy and to add more resources, not just to wildfires, but to managing our forests. What we're seeing right now, the fires last year in California alone emitted more carbon, right, than every car in California combined. So if you really want to take a step to make our air cleaner, one of the first things we can do is use our natural filters and keep them healthy, not allow them to burn. Some of that has to do with healthy forestry, which is why I've actually had officials from both administrations, the Obama administration and now the current administration, come out, see our federal forests to help us change the way they're managed. Another piece there has to do with our hydro system. You know, there are radical environmentalists right now who are trying to rip out the entire system. It's 70% of our power. It is the most renewable, clean form of load generation that we have so far. Protecting that is how we grow jobs. We talk about middle class jobs, manufacturing jobs, forestry, forest products jobs. That is I think something we haven't talked about it yet, but I think it's central to keeping our economy moving and keeping our environment moving in the right direction, and really to the economic security of folks here.
Thank you. Carolyn, what's the biggest issue?
The biggest issue we haven't talked about, I mean, I think the biggest issue facing our country is affordable health care and what we're gonna do about it, and to try to ensure that every American has the same type of health coverage that members of Congress have. And so I'm glad we spoke on that. But we didn't talk about Social Security, and we didn't talk about Medicare, and we didn't talk about how the debate over those earned benefit programs is going to be affected by the corporate tax giveaway. Because the reality is, because of the corporate tax giveaway, which adds to the debt, which we talked about, there's going to be a movement by the Republicans in Congress to go after earned income benefits and also benefits that protect some of our most vulnerable Americans. So those are two things I'd like us to talk about, but talk about it in the context of what the fiscal state of our country is doing in terms of deficit and how it's going to affect that. So that's what I would.
And one question for each of you. I want to touch upon some criticisms.
Yeah.
Jamie, there have been a lot of questions, and believe me, we get a ton of letters to the editor about you not holding in-person town halls. But how do you defend that?
I've held over 76 town halls, in-person town halls, telephone town halls.
When was the last in-person?
So let me finish the question. I think to assume that there's one way to get the accurate input of the people you serve in 21st century America is to hold an in-person town hall is laughable. Now, I think they're important, I'm gonna continue to do them. But they serve one niche. My telephone town halls have between 4,000 and 5,000 people on every single one. And in terms of communication, exchange of ideas, we get as many or more questions into those than we do in a traditional town hall, and they're effective. I'm going to continue to do this in a way that allows me to communicate back and forth with the people I serve. And I think the only reason to say that there's only one method to talk to people, there's only one method that counts, right, to get the feedback of the people you serve is if you're trying to score political points, quite frankly. This isn't a new thing for me. This wasn't the way I've operated. We've had this, several elections now. And I do both. But I do hundreds and hundreds of in-person meetings, issue-specific, big group, open question, one-on-one. Anybody who calls my office
Are you
gets
doing
involved.
actual in-person town halls?
Yeah, I have, and I will.
Where you're in the same room together?
Yes. Yes. And the irony to me is I did those ad nauseum. I did tiny ones and big ones, and I call them community coffees. And because I call them community coffees and I served coffee, this paper wouldn't cover them. So we did the exact same format for the last one I did, and I changed the name. I said it's a town hall, and it got this paper covered it. And I thought, my goodness, if I'm not effectively communicating with the people I serve, then how am I on the issues that are of importance to them?
When was the last one?
I did one last year in person. I did one earlier this week in front of open questions. I've done dozens and dozens. Gosh, I'm trying to think of in Clark County the last time I addressed a group where it wasn't even a member only come ask, like Rotary or something. Sometimes they're issue specific, although you can ask whatever you want, but this is on forestry, this one's on whatever.
Okay, and thank you, that answers the question.
Can I just follow up on that? So first of all, you said, would we come back tomorrow? I'm happy to come back tomorrow. And happy to debate in every county. I hope that happens. I hope that we are able to
Do
hold
you guys
debates.
have any debate scheduled?
We're open to it. We're waiting. There's a couple that come every fall.
I would like to do
I've got one
it in every
in
single county. But I do want to talk about my 33 live town halls and how they differ. People could ask me anything. I'm there for 90 minutes, only 60 minutes today. We advertise it on Facebook so that anybody can come. It's a great way for me to listen to constituents, but they are public, and we're very proud of that. And we're proud of the fact that 2,300, I think, and 50, we've got a tally of people have come to do that. And I'm also not opposed to telephone town halls as well, but those should always be in addition to, because I think that you have to look at your constituents in the eye and talk about why you voted the way you did, hear the criticism from them. So we're going to continue to do that throughout this campaign. I'm glad to hear that she'll be starting from 12.
Then Carolyn,
Yeah.
a question for you. When did you move to Clark County, And did you move just to run in this race?
No.
Okay.
If you follow my professional career, you'll know that I was given an administrative position as Director of Strategic Partnerships. And when I got that, we started looking for a home here. But it was July of last year. One of the interesting things about the discussion of the carpetbagger issue is the traditional definition is somebody who doesn't have ties to the local community. I've taught here for 23 years. I've taught thousands of students. I've taught generations of students. When I'm out there on the campaign trail, I meet Guy Glenn in Pacific County, who I taught 17 years ago. I've been awarded for my community work. So this is the Republican attack on me. It's something the representative has done multiple times with her comments today. And I would say talk to the people in the community who know me. Talk to the people at the CREDC who I've worked with. Talk to the people who I've worked with in the city and the county, and they'll tell you that I'm a member of this community. I'm happy to be so now, and I'm happy to be having lived here for a year. But I would not relocate just to run for political office.
Just one clarifying
Sure.
question then, do you own, rent, lease, or otherwise control a residential real estate property within the state of Oregon?
Yes.
Or do you do?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. We're debating now whether or not we want to sell it or rent it out. My preference is to sell that home. Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the reasons for the delay and my whole family joining me is my husband was waiting for a job transfer. We've been working on it for months. But I would focus on my residency and what I've done in this community for 23 years. The fact that I'm so tired of it because I think it's such an interesting attack because it distracts from the issues that we should be talking about. But that's the way it's going to happen. I'm just going to do what I'm doing, continue to have my town halls, meet with people, and talking about how much I've given to this community, being awarded for it.
I think I think that the moving from Oregon to here is interesting, but I don't think it's hugely relevant. I think the only place where it could be important has to do with the issue of tolling in Portland. And I do think that's central to the people here.
But it's
I think
funny
that's one
because-
of the reasons why we haven't heard as much talk about that, and it makes me concerned.
The
I don't
argument-
think it's as,
Okay,
it's
and
fun
let's-
fodder, but.
Let's go ahead and move forward. Give us your final pitch to voters, why people should support you. We'll start with Karen.
Well, I think the first reason would be why we should make a change. And I think that all of the people in Southwest Washington should ask themselves, in the 8 years that the incumbent's been in office, what have they done? What have they done for the district? But what have they done on the major policy issues that we've talked about today? And how have they gone about doing it? So I think we have to start from that place. Because this is a referendum, I think, on our incumbents. And once you come to the answer, which is it's time for a change, I hope that people will be attracted to me and for my campaign. I grew up in a working class family in a rural area, so I can identify with the struggles of people living in the rural counties, which is the vast, at least, space in the 3rd Congressional District. And I've worked hard all my life. I'm very proud of what I've done as a university professor on issues of civility, and I think that we have to hire somebody to office who is going to put a constitutional check on this president. I'm alarmed at our democracy. I'm alarmed that we haven't talked about the security of our elections and that the Republicans have not invested money to make sure that our elections are secure. By the way, that is also another issue we should have talked about because I think the system is broken. And I believe Congress needs to reassert its Article I power so that it has more control over issues of trade, over issues of national security, and it hasn't done so. And the way to do that is to hire different people for office. And I think we're going to see a brand new crop of members in the House of Representatives and hopefully the Senate who will look at these as policy problems that need policy solutions as opposed to things with a D or an R after their name. And so I applaud the Congresswoman for her bipartisan efforts on many of these smaller issues that impact people in this district, ones that I would continue, but we also need that at a higher level on these issues that matter. And I would go back to affordable health care and the fact that the Republicans in Congress, including the representative, voted over 80 times proudly to repeal the ACA and never had a replacement until we have something cobbled together at the last minute that she voted against, and I applaud her for that vote. But that is the major policy issue facing America today, and there is bipartisan support that's growing for a solution.
All right, thank you. Jamie, your final pitch?
So having grown up here, I think it gives me a unique perspective on the folks that I serve. I think that the number one, I think it's true, it's going to be a referendum on are you better off or not? 90% of Americans, including people in Southwest Washington, have bigger paychecks, they have better benefits, and they have more stable jobs. And that has exploded economically for us. People have the ability to work, to save. Their retirements are growing again, and that's huge. And that's one of the ways we strengthen and secure Social Security and Medicare, something I will never vote to cut. I think it's important that we protect them. Part of protecting them is getting our budget in order. Part of it is having more taxpayers. I strongly believe that not all issues are partisan. Some are, but most of the issues that my opponent has said are small issues around here are huge to those of us who live here. Tolls is huge. It's going to impact every family, Republican or Democrat. Sea lions is not a small issue. Again, Republican or Democrat, they want to make sure we're protecting our endangered salmon runs. And I've worked across the aisle and across the chamber to get that bill positioned, and I think it's going to get signed into law. It's an amazing accomplishment, and it was done because of somebody who understands and has built relationships with folks. It's not a campaign talking point. You know, I'm on my on path to be a senior appropriator, which is one of the things we need if we're going to pull down federal dollars for a Columbia River Bridge fix. And I think ultimately you need someone who's going to stand up for them. I have demonstrated, whether it's the Obama administration or the Trump administration, I'm going to stand up for the people of Southwest Washington. You've never heard me bash Democrats for being Democrats. You've never heard me take it out on President Obama because he was a liberal. I'm not going to do that with this president. And I think because I've chosen to focus on issues and foster relationships, I've gotten things done for people here. And the economy is probably the biggest accomplishment, I'd say, that folks in this region can benefit from, is the change in the tax code, the change in the regulatory environment. That's why we see more businesses locating here and growth opportunities. With that come needs like transportation, again, not a small bipartisan thing, something we're working on. But I think it's important to have someone who's going to stand up and be their voice in the other Washington. It's an intimidating place. It's a good old boys club. I can't tell you how many times I've had a man come to me and pat my head and tell me to do something a certain way. And maybe it's playing basketball at Prairie High School, I learned to throw a few elbows. I've never been afraid to take that challenge on, and I'll continue to do that if people want me to go back to DC.
Great, well, thank you to both of you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.